After he welcomed students, parents, and teachers affected by gun violence at schools. Now he says he is open to concealed carry for some teachers and increasing background checks. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith, and here today, Harris Faulkner, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, former deputy spokesperson for the State Department and Fox News analyst Marie Harf, and joining us on the couch, my co-anchor on America's Newsroom, Mr. Bill Hemmer himself is here, and he is outnumbered.
It's been too long.
Haven't had enough of you today.
Great to be back with you, ladies. Difficult day, difficult topic, but we'll get through it together.
All right.
Good to have you.
Good to have you. Let's begin. President Trump is meeting today with state and local officials to talk about school safety. It comes after he held a listening session at the White House for students, teachers, and parents affected by gun violence. He listened to their concerns and endorsed certain gun control measures. Tweeting this morning, "I will be strongly pushing comprehensive background checks with an emphasis on mental health, raise age to 21, and end sale of bump stocks. Congress is in a mood to finally do something on the issue, I hope." The president also talked about the possibility of arming teachers.
This would only be obviously for people that are very adept at handling a gun. And it's called concealed carry, where a teacher would have a concealed gun on them. They'd go for special training, and they would be there, and you would no longer have a gun-free zone. A gun-free zone is let's go in and let's attack, because bullets aren't coming back at us.
He clarified his remarks in several tweets today, saying, "I never said give teachers guns. What I said was to look at the possibility of giving concealed guns to only the best. 20% of teachers, a lot, would now be able to immediately fire back if a savage sicko came to a school with bad intentions. A gun-free school is a magnet for bad people. Attacks would end. History shows that a school shooting lasts on average 3 minutes. It takes police and first responders approximately 5 to 8 minutes to get to site of crime. If a potential sicko shooter knows that a school has talented teachers and others who will be instantly shooting, the sicko will never attack. Cowards won't go there. Problem solved." The NRA's Wayne LaPierre speaking this morning at CPAC, the annual Conservative Political Action Conference, emphasizing the need for schools to be better protected.
Every day, young children are being dropped off at schools that are virtually wide open, soft targets for anyone bent on mass murder.
And what a moment that was. Bill Hemmer, you and I were sitting live watching Wayne LaPierre here. An unexpected guest. He was not on the schedule, but did pop up there and we're at the top of the
And he came to name
hour.
names as we sat there and listened, and came ready with a lot of fire, frankly, about his address today. It's a hard topic. I think this past week has bummed me out. I think it's bummed a lot of you out as well, and I'm certain our viewers also. And I also think that laws are made in a way where they're difficult to change and they're difficult to create, and it's going to take some time. And I truly do not know what comes out on the other side, if anything comes out on the other side. We've been down this road many times. But in the meantime, I thought what the sheriff did in Broward County yesterday what was pretty gutsy. You know, armed deputies throughout the schools, and you can only imagine what he's hearing. You know, parents are coming to him every day saying, is my kid going to be okay? Am I going to be able to drop him off in the morning and pick him up in the afternoon? And I also think that decision gave the president a little bit of cover yesterday with his suggestion about arming teachers, arming deputies rather, throughout the school system. That is a lot quicker, Sandra, than it will to take Washington to pass a law or wait on any of the 50 states to create their own laws.
It's interesting. And the president says he's listening to everything. And here he is holding another listening session at the White House as we speak. Marie, is this a president that is showing willingness to change things?
Well, I think his tweets this morning made that clear, including advocating for raising the age for something like the AR-15 to 21. That is a state issue that each state would have to do. As Bill mentioned, that's challenging. But the NRA doesn't support that. So if he continues to advocate for some ideas that maybe go against what people expect him to say, I think that's a good thing. You know, we can talk about all of the different things, whether it's school, having people armed in schools, whether it's mental health screening. But I think these students are also going to keep pushing us towards a conversation about the Second Amendment. And even Justice Scalia wrote that it is not unlimited. Where is the line? Appeals courts have routinely upheld assault weapons bans in individual states. I don't know where the line is, but it's a conversation our country, I think, may now be having in a real way. Like Bill, I don't know what comes out on the other side. But it's going to take a lot of political courage on both sides of the aisle to tackle this in a real way.
It's amazing, Harris, our producer, letting us know that when the president walked into the room there, holding this now second listening session at the White House, he said, a lot of things are happening. There's a tremendous feeling that we want to get something done, a feeling including at the NRA, he said.
Yeah, you know, you talk about people giving the president cover. The conversation with the NRA, I felt, started with that town hall on CNN last night, because you had Senator Marco Rubio there. You had Dana Loesch, who also spoke at CPAC this morning. She was in the center seat taking all of the questions from these students last night. It was pretty combative at times, but there was this moment when Rubio said, we have got to stop being a society that doesn't let, information change our way ahead. Basically, he's saying, there's nothing wrong with a course correction, and I'm paraphrasing him, if you get better information that gets you to see things differently. And listening to Dana last night represent all of the NRA members and the rank, it was pretty combative at times, but there was this moment when Rubio said, we have got to stop being a society that doesn't let, information change our way ahead. Basically, he's saying, there's nothing wrong with a course correction, and I'm paraphrasing him, if you get better information that gets you to see things differently. And listening to Dana last night represent all of the NRA members and the rank and file there at the organization, as she put it, talk about background checks and talk about the component of mental health and all of that. And it was really fascinating to see that maybe there is an opening for information to come in for people to consider things that they might never have considered. And I think when you talk about giving the president cover, I think that gives him some cover too.
Well, and can I say real quick to Marie's point, because there's been a lot of criticism of the Florida legislature and not passing legislation regarding AR-15s and what people like to call assault weapons. But I would just remind everyone that back in 2013, you had 16 Democrats who voted against that type of legislation, even Democrats that hailed from blue states. So this is often presented as a left versus right issue, and it is not. And so I think that we just need to be honest about this conversation. And I think if we do, and we come from it from a perspective of what would actually have prevented previous shootings, what could prevent future mass shootings, that's the place to approach this. But too often I've heard, as I mentioned, this criticism of it's the Florida legislature's fault or if they just did that. But as I mentioned, we've seen Democrats vote against the same sort of bill.
This was a sick kid, and he's been sick for years. And he was walking around Broward County, Florida, a flashing warning sign on his forehead every day. And so many people saw it.
Well, 39 visits from law enforcement.
If you're going to submit to a mental health check, which I'm all in favor of, who's putting the information in the system? Would he have failed a mental health check?
Well, only 38 states require it to be put into a federal system.
I don't think we have the facts or the evidence that would suggest that his state of mind would have been entered in the system anyway. A social worker went to his house a year and a half ago, and she deemed that he was not a danger to other people. And if that's the bar, and if he operated within state law, what do mental background checks do?
He was also checked out by a Florida mental health hospital. And we can go back, and I'm from the state of Virginia, and you can go back to, I don't know if you guys remember with Cray Deeds, a Virginia state senator, and his son, who had mental health issues, stabbed him and then ended up killing himself. And the night before, he was trying to find help for his son, and there was not a single bed available at any of the mental hospitals in the state. So, perhaps these are things we can look at to give parents like that some hope and assistance. I don't know what those answers are, but I think we need to look at a lot of different things like that.
The president did just weigh in further on the background check, saying, I called many senators last night, many congressmen. He said this moments ago in the White House. They're into doing background checks that they wouldn't be thinking about 2 weeks ago. He then went on to address the age limit in that portion of the conversation, working on getting the age up to 21 instead of 18. We'll work on bump stocks and mental health as well. He also said he'll be going to be talking seriously about opening mental institutions and in some cases reopening them.
We're about to hear that. Is that right? As we await these remarks. It was striking to me yesterday that this is President Trump at his best. You know, being in a room of people or interacting with others. And you think about, he's basically been taken off the field when it comes to that aspect of him being commander-in-chief. He doesn't do interviews. He doesn't hold press conferences. That's because of the Mueller matter. And as long as the Mueller matter is out there and the lawyers of the White House have control over his schedule, you're going to see less and less of it. But I think it's a reminder yesterday about how effective he can be when he's in a room with regular folks.
But that only matters so far. I think you're going to hear increasingly from parents and students across the country that words are important, actions are actually more important. And if the Republican Congress or state legislatures can't actually act, that will be a bigger problem.
Yeah, but he can do some things by executive order.
He can. He can, and he should.
And he's pledging action in that room right now. Meantime, signs of possible compromise on gun control. Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida facing intense questioning from students, teachers, and families last night affected by the Parkland shooting at that town hall that CNN held. He said he does not support the president's idea of arming some teachers, but that he is open to changing his position on other issues.
I absolutely believe that in this country, if you are 18 years of age, you should not be able to buy a rifle, and I will support a law that takes that right away. I traditionally have not supported looking at magazine clip size. And after this and some of the details I've learned about it, I'm reconsidering that position, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because while it may not prevent an attack, it may save lives in an attack.
What a moment that was. But then he was asked whether he would forego donations from the NRA.
People buy into my agenda, and I do support the Second Amendment. I will always accept the help of anyone who agrees with my agenda.
And the head of the NRA was at CPAC a little bit earlier today, slamming lawmakers who want dramatic restrictions on guns.
How about Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Bill de Blasio, Andrew Cuomo, Cory Booker, Christopher Murphy, and Keith Ellison? They are not Democrats in the mold of John F. Kennedy or Tip O'Neill. They hide behind labels like Democrat, left-wing, and progressive to make their socialist agenda more palatable. And that is terrifying.
So we watched that together earlier today, but going back to Marco Rubio, and I heard you as we were watching that together, Bill, say, wow, that took guts for him to stand up there.
Took a lot of guts. Yeah, that's right. Tender moment, touching time for that community. That's the county, as you know, Marie, voted overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton. And for a Republican senator to walk in there, it showed a lot of guts on his part.
Absolutely. He showed up, and to Harris's point earlier, he said, I'm looking at new information. I'm looking at these issues in a different way. That's what we want politicians to do, to look at the world as it is and say, how can I help? And I give Marco Rubio a lot of credit. Governor Scott didn't show up. He was invited. He didn't show up. We cannot be scared to engage on these issues because they're too hard or no one solution will stop everything. We have to be able to tackle the tough issues in a nuanced way. And I give him credit last night, enormous credit.
You know, gosh, there's so many ways that I could push back about how President Obama didn't show up on certain networks because he didn't want to be challenged either. But I'll leave that for another day.
That's also not what we're talking about today.
Bill Hemmer, how complicated does it make this matter with the president, the NRA on one side? Because it may not be a Republican-Democrat issue, but the NRA is clearly on one side, and those who were for more gun control are clearly on the other, whichever political parties they may ascribe to. Where does that leave the president?
You know, I've often thought, even going back to the campaign, that this was a president that did not have, I mean, we talked about being a conservative president or being a Democratic liberal from New York or going back to the Republican Party, et cetera. And we've watched this line of his political background. Maybe that gives him a grand opportunity to broker this agreement or to make a change that is satisfactory, at least to some people. You know, on March 24th, I mean, Washington, D.C. is going to be rocking. You know, you think that that scene in Tallahassee, Florida yesterday was something. Wait till they have a month to prepare and plan. And it's going to be really hard to deny a 16 or 17-year-old teenager that came from, you know, thousands of miles away to Washington, D.C. and not listen to their voice. I think the president's heard that voice already. And yesterday was a really good start. And we'll see in a moment here what he says.
But I also think there are a lot of voices that also aren't being heard in this country as well. And I think they need to be heard. And they often aren't the ones that are presented on the mainstream media, particularly at networks like CNN. And I think those voices would be the individuals at the Texas church shooting, who many lives were saved because you had an NRA instructor with an AR-15 who shot back. And so I think there are a lot of people in this country from various parts of the country who feel that if you take my gun away, that is how I protect myself. And I think there are a lot of Americans, including myself.
Wayne LaPierre missed a great opportunity today to talk about the shooting of Steve Scalise, how his life was saved. How about the number of police officers who have been gunned down in the line of duty in the past week alone? Had he taken their stories and woven that into the story today, I think he would have found a little more sense.
And let's be honest about the fact that if someone was shooting at us on this couch right now, we sure as heck would wish that there is someone who knows how to use a gun that is around here to protect us and shoot back. And I think we also have to be cognizant of the fact that many Americans are worried about their rights being taken away, their ability to protect themselves or their family being taken away as well.
You know, one thing hits me, though, and I do think about those things because we sit out here on very broad streets. The public can see a little bit of what's going on, but we do have a lot of people around us. And so we've had people bang on the glass before, so we know, we sometimes think about these things. The difference is we have patrol on the perimeter.
Right.
And so then the
Security
question
guards.
becomes, what can you do without Washington getting involved? Because God forbid it would take them as long to solve this as they have immigration or anything else, right? Or even this issue over and over again, which they've yet to solve.
That is...
And hardening those targets of schools, just like we probably need to do with many more of our malls, because we know that those shopping malls are also softer targets. That's something that we can do. Does it have to be teachers? No. You know, the law enforcement talked about deputies. There are a lot of ways we can do it, but hardening those targets is something that's immediate. And I would think that people would want to talk about that.
I think that's a concern for so many right now, as the president is there with this now second listening session at the White House, hearing these families grieving over the loss of loved ones. Right. And the concern for many of us is that this is getting so political so fast, and this debate's getting so heated, and it's becoming so left-right issued. You know, going back to Bill's point about the NRA chief up there talking, is this helping the situation, and are those families going to see something done to help protect our schools at the end of all of this?
Well, I hope the families see some of that, some changes in the wake of this, but I think Wayne LaPierre missed a huge opportunity. Look, I don't agree with much of what he said, but there could have been a tone of coming together. His tone was so angry. It was so partisan. He went after Democrats, called them socialists. I just think he missed an opportunity in the wake of tragedy to be more uniting, and he went the opposite direction. I was really offended by parts of his speech.
There was clearly some
personally.
But you also have those on the left who are specifically naming the NRA as if they are somehow responsible for some of these mass shootings we've had in this country.
That's where they take offense.
So I would be offended if I was the NRA as well. And I think we do need to approach this conversation from what are actual things that could make a difference. And I think Senator John Cornyn has looked at focusing on the NICS database and trying to place incentives on federal and state to make sure that they're inputting the actual data that would prevent people who shouldn't be obtaining guns from obtaining. I think that is a smart and common sense thing for us to discuss. So there are a lot of places of compromise, but it does get partisan. It does get partisan very quickly.
Those kids at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas go back to school on Tuesday. What has changed in terms of hardening that target to make it safer for them?
Nothing.
All right. Well, we are still waiting to hear those remarks from the president. Meanwhile, we will bring those to you, by the way, live when they begin. He's holding this official meeting right now on the issue of school safety. So we'll keep watching that. In the meantime, President Trump and the media, it has not always been a smooth relationship. But wait until you hear the praise he's getting from Bill Clinton's former press secretary. The one thing he says the president is doing better than Clinton or Obama. Plus, Bernie Sanders appearing to throw Hillary Clinton under the bus over her response to Russian meddling. His claim that she could have done more. We will debate.
I did not know that Russian bots were promoting my campaign. Russian bots were not promoting my campaign. In April and May, it appeared that there were lots of strange things happening attacking Hillary Clinton.
All right, we are awaiting the president at the White House at this hour. Right now, he is meeting with state and local officials. It is another listening session for this president. He held one yesterday as well. He is listening to those on the ground and what they need to secure our schools and keep our children safe. The president apparently walked into this meeting saying a lot of things are happening. There's a tremendous feeling that we want to get something done. So we're waiting on those remarks from the president. We'll bring those to you live when they begin.
Meanwhile, Democrats demanding some big bucks to safeguard against possible Russian meddling in the upcoming midterm elections. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer asking for more than $300 million in new funding to help safeguard the November elections against Kremlin interference. This as Bernie Sanders appears to be blaming Hillary Clinton for not doing more to stop the Russian attack on the last presidential election. Watch this.
The real question to be asked is, what was the Clinton campaign? They had more information about this than we did. A guy who was on my staff, he checked it out, and he went to the Clinton campaign, and he said, you know what? I think these guys are Russians.
Wow, I wonder how that played out inside the Democrat Party. Well, here's a clue. Sanders later appeared to backtrack, telling Politico, quote, no candidate, whether Secretary Clinton or anyone else, should have to wage an electoral contest in the face of foreign government intervention. End quote. And a from Bill Hemmer.
God forbid they spend $600 in Pennsylvania.
Don't look at me.
They spend $45 in Michigan.
But both things can be true, Bill.
Look, I think
both things can be true.
Every time we do this story, we must mention no votes were changed.
No voting machines were changed.
No, not only that, but no votes were changed. You're talking about influence now. I'm talking physical votes being changed last year.
Yes.
Look, Sarah Sanders said 2 days ago, the Department of Homeland Security is looking at that. I think we deserve an answer. I think we need to know what the administration is doing. I want to know what their plan is. But $600 in Wisconsin, I don't know. I think we're a better country than that.
So, Lisa, what this does maybe indicate, though, is that Democrats know that this happened on their watch, right? That they knew that it was, previous to even that election, which we come back to the question, why didn't they deal with the Russian meddling as it was coming into this latest election?
And there's reports that President Obama didn't want to do anything because he thought that Hillary Clinton would win. But I remember that's what's been reported.
I know, but I was there and it's not true.
I also remember going back in September before the election where you had the Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, telling us that the system is way too decentralized for Russians to hack. And then we know, based on the book Shatter, that 24 hours after Hillary Clinton lost, they specifically looked to blame the election loss on Russia. So I think there's a place of great dishonesty from Democrats on this issue. Also, the media who are trying to pretend, as Bill just pointed out, that somehow $2,000 on social media in a state like Wisconsin swayed the election for Donald Trump.
With the Russians interfering.
And anyone who's ever worked in campaign politics and knows anything about advertisement spending, that is nothing. That is pennies and not anything that's going to sway an election. Perhaps she should have stepped foot in the state of Wisconsin.
You're okay with Russia interfering?
No, I'm not. But I think that
then what should we do about it?
But I think that the idea that somehow $2,000 spent in Wisconsin shaped the election is a complete joke, and it is places such dishonesty from the individuals out there that are trying to pretend that it is.
What these Democrats are talking about with funding, though, is preventing it from happening again. You want to debate 2016, I'm happy to debate it. It doesn't matter anymore. We have an election coming up in 6 months, and that money could go to harden our defenses. The administration does not yet have a plan to prevent it again. We heard that from the intelligence chiefs.
You got to have the tech companies cooperate with you.
You have to have the tech companies.
Listen, I've had bigger bar tabs in Wisconsin than the amount of money that apparently has been spent.
Go out with you, Bill.
You had a bar tab bigger than $2,000?
That's not
we have time in the show to hear about that.
Before Lent, that was. Look, the administration owes us an explanation.
Yes.
They owe us a plan. Let's see what they come up with.
Right.
But if we're going to go back to 2016 and say that the Russians cast this thing one way or the other, I think it's just hogwash. We are smarter than that, people. Have you ever identified a Russian ad before? Anyone?
Yes, there were tens of thousands of them.
When you saw it, did you say, That's a Russian ad.
56%
So what's interesting
came
about
after
that
the
is
election.
that there was a long article in the Times today that I thought was pretty interesting. It's like teaching bots to talk and how their language is. Did you see this?
Did
how
not.
their language is like a whole cartoon thing, but it's serious. How their language has changed to become more effective in a very short period of time. So what you're saying is so true, Bill Hemmer, even though you didn't even read the article with the artwork.
Check it out.
That is that, you know, people are going to have a hard time delineating what is. So how can you even say?
This is where the tech companies
Votes
come
were
in.
swayed. Outside of the fact that it's already been, I think, shown that they weren't.
But this is where the tech, no, that's a different issue. Whether people were influenced is different than whether votes were changed in voting booths. Those are two different issues.
Only one really matters.
That's not. That's
The
absolutely
action,
not
correct?
true.
No?
If people's votes, if they were
But
influenced
if they
to
weren't
change their
influenced
votes,
enough to change their vote, what difference
but
does
if
it make?
they were, people
Gosh, who do I
attended.
sound like when I
Harris,
say that?
People attended rallies in Florida organized by Russians.
And also
people
rallies
have a
against
right to know
President
that,
Trump
though.
as well. But can I say
that is
something?
concerning, you guys. As Americans, we have a right to know that.
But I also think Nancy Pelosi
Period.
is more concerned with undermining President Trump
Why
and
do
his
you take this back to
administration.
Nancy Pelosi all the time,
Because
man?
That has been the focus of the entire conversation
Bill?
surrounding Russia. is to undermine
Organized
the
by a
president.
babushka.
Okay. On that note.
Okay, we're going to move
Spasibo.
on now.
Yet.
He's your partner,
Those are the
honey.
only two words in Russian I know.
You
as well,
two
Bill.
together. Oh. Democrats divided over whether nominating a woman to run against President Trump in 2020 is the party's best bet to take back the House. Goodness gracious, we're back down to those compartmentalized voters again. Could this be a winning idea for them? We'll debate it. And good news for the GOP tax law ahead of the midterm elections, whether the boost can help Republicans hold on to seats and the effect it will have on the messaging strategies of both political parties going forward. Stay with us.
People across the country are bringing home extra bucks thanks to the GOP tax law. According to the White House Council of Economic Advisors, the average American worker will see a $4,000 increase in their annual paycheck. This, as the RNC's internal polling shows, the new tax law is now seen more favorably than not in 7 battleground states, as is the pitch to spend money on fixing roads, bridges, and highways. The news comes as both parties are setting up their messaging strategies for the midterm elections. Something tells me this will be a big part of the Republican platform. Bill Hemmer.
Yes, it will. And if the economy's doing well, they've got a shot of holding the majority. If it's not, we're going to have a very interesting November. I don't think this election right now is about Hispanics or African Americans. I think it's about women. And depending on how many women turn out to vote, that will go a long way in determining whether or not you hold the majority in the House. If they lose the majority in the House, I think impeachment proceedings on whatever grounds, throw a dart, they will begin the first week of January 2019.
Marie, do you think that? You think Democrats would do that?
Don't. I think that unless Bob Mueller.
You don't.
I don't think that Democrats, if we take back the House, which I think on balance now we will, that we will start impeachment proceedings unless Bob Mueller comes up with, high crimes and misdemeanors, something that actually, I think the mainstream Democratic Party and leadership will not push that. You may have some outliers who do. I don't think that the leadership will push that.
Al Green?
I'll put
Isn't he
money
one of
on it
those?
right now.
I'm not.
Why are you
convinced.
smirking like that?
I'm not smirking.
It's a little Hemmer smirk.
If you look at some of
I don't
these
mean Al Green,
special
the singer.
elections right now, not on the national level, but on the state level, for some of these state house, you have districts where Trump won by a lot of points
And
in 2000.
Democrats are flipping it.
And they're flipping
It
that.
happened
And I
this
think
week, actually.
This is a real danger for Republicans. I know they've got their eye on it, but too early to tell whether or not this is going to be a blue wave or not.
Because I've worked, this is my background, is working on political campaigns. I've worked during 2-wave midterm elections. So this is what I love, politics, right? So I think that the tax reform law will help mitigate what would be historic losses or not, historic losses, but historically, the party not in control loses seats in a midterm election is the point I'm making. I think it can help mitigate some of those losses. My only concern is how much of a motivating and driving factor will it be for Republicans, because midterm elections are about driving out the base. So they have to be excited. They have to be motivated. So I think it depends on how effectively Republicans can utilize it. to get that turnout? Is it that Democrats are going to stop those economic successes, or how is it going to be used? Because they need to motivate people to get out and vote. And before, repealing Obamacare was sort of that motivating factor in the 2010 and 2014 midterm elections.
You know, I thought that Vice President Pence at CPAC this morning, we took that speech live here on Fox News, was starting to get that conversation going by saying promises made, promises kept. He hit that hard. He also said that if you want to bring about change, it takes engagement. I'm paraphrasing him now. That previous was a quote. We need everybody to be engaged. He called upon people to actually get out to the polls and vote in this midterm election year. To me, I think that begins the conversation about intensity. And yeah, you can mention all these other things, but feeling like you're a part of something. He said you're a part of something that President Trump and I, meaning Pence, have created. Continue to be a part of that. Bill, you're
the enthusiasm on the Democratic side.
He had a long list of accomplishments, and I think, you know, and it should be talked about, and they will continue to do that. In private conversations I've had with women outside of work, women who are Democrats, they have said that they felt as if they let the country down because of Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. And that is part of the fuel that's giving this energy, I think, to something that we may see next November. And that may very well be the story when we wake up the day after.
Yep.
Interesting.
I agree.
All right. Sandra, I know you're working on a little something.
I know. So we're getting some new information with the president in this listening session right now. We're told that this is ongoing right now, but he's making specifically some remarks about keeping children safe in this country, specifically recognizing the NRA and what they are pushing for.
Or agreeing to, anyway.
You're going to have to forgive me. I didn't get a printout in front of me.
Age restrictions on some guns, according to the president. The NRA will support age restriction on some guns. That's coming out of this meeting.
So the president going into
But I'm not sure that, I don't think that's a federal question. I think that's a state question.
I think it's really important to get the details here, because this is... The president is saying that the NRA would back age requirements on long guns. There would be a very important distinction to make. The president did indicate going into this that the NRA was talking to him and they were open to some type of change. Listening to LaPierre earlier, the chief of the NRA, he's very heated in this very political moment surrounding this gun debate. So to hear the president say the NRA is actually willing to employ some sort of change here is a big deal.
I want to step in just with the actual quote that we've got from the president now. Quote, "I'm the biggest believer in the Second Amendment." He says he's spoken now to the NRA. Quote, "The NRA is ready to do some things. People like to blame them," end quote. He called John Kelly, his chief of staff, a tough cookie, and said if Kelly were his teacher, he'd want Kelly to have a gun. This is the president talking. On the long gun age restrictions, quote, it should all be at 21, and the NRA will back it. That's the president talking, coming out of this meeting. The pool of reporters, we understand, are still inside the White House right now. So as soon as that video is released, we will play it here on Fox News Channel so that you can see the president yourself making these remarks. Cameras in there, but we can't roll live right now.
I would just add in the political equation on all this, don't think this is any slam dunk. There are House conservatives who will fight hard against this. There are Democrats in the Senate who are up for re-election in November in states where this president won, and don't think that they're all in the bag for it either. Watch this political fight.
Does he do anything executive action?
We'll see, but I also think this discussion began after Las Vegas, and it began with bump stocks.
All right. A former Bill Clinton press secretary claiming President Trump has declared war on the press. Sarah Huckabee Sanders hitting back hard on that as a network anchor bolsters the case that the battle cuts both ways. We debate.
Welcome back. New questions about President Trump's tense relationship with the media after a surprise decision to attend next month's Gridiron Dinner with Washington journalists. Earlier this week, during a panel discussion, former Bill Clinton press secretary Mike McCurry urging White House press secretary Sarah Sanders to change how the president deals with the media, accusing Mr. Trump of declaring a war on the press. Listen.
We have not declared war on the press.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And that's a big difference.
And you need to roll that back. You got to get the president. You can't do it, but the president has got to roll that back.
But the former Clinton spokesperson admitting that President Trump has likely been more available to the media than either his former boss or Barack Obama. Listen to what he had to say.
He's probably been more accessible than either Obama or Clinton.
I think that's a very big difference, and one of the things that's regularly left out of conversations is how accessible this president is and how often he interacts with the press. But